Uh, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Breakfast and Learn. We have Rabbi with us this morning, who's going to be speaking. So without further ado, we look forward to hearing some words of wisdom.
Thank you, Stephen. I think this is my eighth time talking at Breakfast and Learn, but it's my first time as a rabbi. So Stephen says I get an extra 25 minutes. Is that right? That's how it works. Okay. So before we start, I'd like to obviously we're all reeling from news in Israel and checking our phones constantly. We're all in that zone, and so with our hearts and minds there, let's dedicate the learning we do together this morning to the zechut, to the merit of all those in Israel, that they should be safe and they should be secure. And please God, very soon all we'll hear is Besarat Tovat, good news, and that there should be peace and lasting peace as well. Um, when I was in high school, this is an insight into what a rock and roll teenager I was now. When I was in high school, Rabbi Shisler knew me back then, he can confirm. I was a big fan of Les Miserables, the musical, right? I was a big fan. And I used to daven quite regularly we had a Edgeway Yeshurun youth service, and I used to daven there often. And so I thought I'd combine those two things, and I created an entire Musaf Kedusha to all the different songs of Les Mis. Went through each part. Each part was a different song, and I have to tell you, this is my own personal opinion because no one else ever heard it, as we'll discuss. It was beautiful, unbelievable. You would have thought Alfie Boe, Michael Ball was in that. That's at least my perception of how it sounded. I can't confirm. However, as I say, I never actually got any further. It never went anywhere. I never did it in shul. The reason I never did it in shul is because I had a bit of a change of heart, and I thought this may not be appropriate. This might not be right to take these songs, to take these tunes from Les Mis, and to throw them into the Musaf Kedusha. I wasn't sure about it, and so I never actually used that Kedusha. I still remember it all these years later, but I don't actually. Nothing ever happened, and really, that's the topic that I want to talk about this morning. Can we take non-Jewish music and insert it into davening? Take the tunes from non-Jewish occasions and use them in our davening to enhance our davening? That's the question really that I want to discuss today. Now, I discussed a similar version of this shir, a slightly different version and slightly longer with the youth over Shavuot, and it was all very nice. And I thought that's why it'd be good to do a version of that shir today. What I didn't think about was the fact that in the room there are many, many chazanim, there are many excellent ballet tefillah, and they're now going to be leaning forward and going, "Well, I remember I did this tune and this tune," and also, of course, Rabbi Shisler to my right is one of the foremost experts in tefillah in the world. So it seemed like a good idea at the time, but if any of the chazanim start shaking their heads or whatever, we'll just go along with it. All right. So this is our question. Can I take non-Jewish music in davening and do it right now? And use it right now in the tefillah, use it right now in davening. And the truth is the Gemara doesn't really discuss this question. For whatever reason, whenever the Gemara doesn't discuss something, again, we have a couple of problems. Because either it doesn't discuss it because it's not a problem. There's no issue. Why would you have an issue? And therefore, we'll carry on. Or it doesn't discuss it because it's such a crazy Havamina. It's so crazy that you'd think you can take non-Jewish music and put it into our davening. So the Gemara doesn't discuss it. The first source that we really have, I hope everyone has a source sheet in front of them. The first source that we really have on this is the Rif. Rabbi Yitzhak Al-Fazi lived in Morocco and Spain in the 11th century, and he is one of the most important halachic sources, one of the most important early Rishonim. He What he effectively did, if anyone's ever tried to learn Gemara before, you'll know that trying to learn Gemara and work out what I'm actually supposed to do with my life is extremely, extremely difficult. Because this one says this one says this one. You go off on a tangent, and we never resolve the original issue. So what the Rif tried to do is he tried to compile a pure halachic framework where he took out all of the sort of surrounding noise and he just included the words of the Gemara that he felt reflected halacha. And he becomes one of the most important halachic authorities, and he's one of the pillars on which Rav Yosef Cairo, the Beit Yosef, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, bases his work. So he writes this in his Shalot and Shivot. Someone asked him this question. A chazan in source one with now, who seems to be behaving improperly, that he is singing Ishmaelite songs and the like. Do they remove him or not? That's the question that's asked. And he responds, a chazan who utters from his mouth improper things, such as obscenity, and sings Ishmaelite songs, they remove him. And he quotes a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, it cried out against me, therefore I've hated it. So the Rif says, if you're speaking obscenity or if you're singing Ishmaelite songs, what do we do with a chazan? We get rid of him. We remove him. That's the end of the
Can we
story.
bench now?
So we're saying that seems to be. Hang on. We'll say, all right, that seems to be a nice conclusion, right? We've come to the end of the share. Except it's going to get slightly more complicated. So we look at source 5. Source 5 is the Shulchan Aruch, and the Ramah Moshe Islis. He comments on the Shulchan Aruch because the Shulchan Aruch says we can't remove a chazan from his job unless we find in him some disqualification. It's actually a fascinating sugya. If you go through this particular siman in the Shulchan Aruch, it talks about communal figures and at what point reasons you can get rid of them, reasons you can't get rid of them. Very interesting. And the Ramah says a prayer leader, shliach tzibur, who fouls his mouth, i.e., he uses foul language, or he sings non-Jewish songs. We warn him not to do this. And if he doesn't listen, you imagine that chazan not listening. If he doesn't listen, we remove him from his position, right? So the Ramah says very clearly, if he's singing using obscenity or singing non-Jewish songs, we remove him from his position. And the Magen Avraham takes this very much on face value in source 6, and he says a cantor who sings Gentile songs, in other words, which are melody they use for idol worship, we get rid of him. We cast him out. You can't do that. You can't do that. The Magen Avraham seems to understand. It seems pretty clear cut at this point. We have a couple of questions that were actually echoed before the start of the shir itself, which is what exactly is entailed with this term Ishmaelite songs. What does that mean? What exactly does that include? What are the different ways of sort of understanding that? So if we look at source 7, we have the Radbaz, Rabbi David ibn Zimra, who was he lived in source 4. Sorry, I'm on a different numbering here. Source 4 is the Radbaz. Rabbi David ibn Zimra lived in the 15th, 16th century in Sfat and also in Egypt. And he's commenting on this particular idea, and he says, "What are Ishmaelite songs?" He's asking our question. Songs which he would sing in love songs in taverns, disgraceful songs you'd sing in taverns. So what are we talking about according to the Radbaz? He's saying, no. We're not talking about a guy, a chazan, who gets up to the Amud and it comes to the Kedusha and he starts singing, say again? Okay. It's not even come to my Mama. He's not singing Les Mis or Ed Sheeran or Adele or Paul McCartney. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a chazan who by day, he is a chazan, and by night, he's going around the clubs and he's singing rock music with all sorts of awful stuff going on.
Like rugby song.
That is what we're talking. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. So Radbaz says something completely different. We are talking about a different scenario. So about a chazan who is moonlighting as a club singer, or the equivalent at the time, a tavern singer who's going around singing inappropriate songs. That's how the Radbaz understands it. A completely different understanding. Furthermore, if we look at source 8, source 5, let's stick this here to avoid this confusion, right? If we look at source 5, we're going to see the Bach says something very interesting as well. Okay, the Bach is Rabbi Yoel Sirkes, lived in Poland in the 16th century, 17th century, a very important commentator on the Torah. And he says the following: what they sing in synagogues, melodies which they, the Christians, sing in their house of prayer, it seems that it's not forbidden, except precisely those melodies which are specific to idol worshippers, since it is a law for idol worship. But if they are not specifically for idol worship, it seems that there is no prohibition. The Mishnah Brura quotes this Bach. So the Bach is saying something, he's also adding a qualification here. Not quite the same as the Radbaz, but he's saying, when we say that a chazan can't get up to the Amud, can't get up to the Bima, and start singing non-Jewish tunes in davening, what are we talking about specifically? He can't use tunes that are used for idolatry. He can't, so you can't turn on Songs of Praise in the morning on BBC and think, oh, that'll make a beautiful Keladon, that tune right there. That'll be wonderful. I'm going to stick it in davening. Everyone's going to enjoy that. You can't do that. Why? Because let's take it for granted at the moment that we're going to count Christianity as Avodah Zarah, which is not so clear, but let's take that for granted. They're using the songs for idol worship, using the songs for Avodah Zarah, for idolatry. You can't, says the Bach, you can't use that. So what would the Bach say about taking an Ed Sheeran song or an Adele song or a Paul McCartney song and sticking it into davening? Seemingly he'd say it's okay. Because at this point, There doesn't have to. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it. There's not songs for idolatry, by and large. There's not idolatrous songs. They're love songs. They're songs about life. They're not used for a sort of sacral purpose for another religion. And for the Bach, that seems to be okay. So we've already got a couple of categories here of what we see. We have perhaps the view we started with, the overarching view that no, any Ishmaelite song or any non-Jewish song, can't put it into davening, we'll get rid of the chazan. Then the Radbaz wanted to say, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're saying if the chazan is moonlighting as a club singer, as a tavern singer, and singing inappropriate songs, that's going to be an issue. By the way, if you look back at source 2, there's quite a good proof for the Radbaz, because if you look at what the Ramah says, he says a prayer leader who fouls his mouth or sings non-Jewish songs. He uses those two things together. Now, presumably, and this would be a big problem, he's not talking about a chazan who goes up on the bimmer, starts davening, and in the middle of davening starts swearing and, effing and blind. That would be a big problem, right? That is really, really not good. Can I, as my authority, that's not good, right? There we go. Okay, it's absolutely not good. That would be a massive. Presumably, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a chazan, therefore, who outside of his duties as a chazan, he still has a kedusha, he has a sanctity that he has to uphold. He can't be swearing or using bad language outside of his duties. And therefore, when it says or sings non-Jewish songs, maybe that's outside of his duties too. Maybe so that seems to be a good proof of the Rabbaz. That's what we're talking about. The Bach says slightly differently. He says, no, what are we talking about? You can't use songs of Avodah Zarah. You can't use songs from other religions. But if it's not a song from another religion, it's just a love song or whatever. What's the problem? So we have these couple of categories already. I was going to start off, I forgot, by saying we have big questions here, because not only do we have our question about Les Mis, can I put Les Mis in, or Adele, or whoever the singer you want to put in? That's sort of one view. Then we have a question, if I hear a nice church song, can I do that? Which is what the Bach is talking about. But also, a lot of the songs that we have that have become part of our liturgy come from a non-Jewish origin, it seems. So Matzah is a good example, seems to be the case. It comes from a non-Jewish song, a Christian song. Another example is people know the Zemer, Kiesh Mereh Shabbat. So it goes, that is an Ottoman marching song. That is an Ottoman march. I could send you the original, like the YouTube of not the original, presumably, because they wouldn't have recorded it, but I can send you a version of that song. It's absolutely uncanny. The one that I heard recently, which also blew my mind, is Kaddish, that we say in the middle of Yom Noraim. The tune that we take from there, where it goes, that's like the core of the Yom Noraim service, right in the middle of the Nusach. That is a Russian marching song. Okay, as a Russian marching song. And I heard a great story about some rabbi who didn't believe it was a Russian marching song. Was you? Go on, tell us the story.
Yeah, I was in Russia, and before Perestroika and Glasnost, we were with a group of youngsters, and I said to one of them, "Have you ever heard this before?" Da 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 da. I said, "Yes, the Russian marching song."
There you go. All right, that's excellent. Okay, so the question then we have also is now all these songs. Do we next time we get out to daven on the Yom Noraim or Hanukkah or whatever it is? Do we have a problem singing Matzah or singing that Kaddish? Or anything else where it comes from an origin, which is or Kiesh Mereh Shabbat, all these songs which come from a non-Jewish origin. And the other question I just wanted to add to that is in the youth, in our youth, they take their minhag very, very seriously. So if we have a minhag that the tune we sing for Adon Olam is match of the day. Now I've tried, you cannot change this minhag. It's met with fury if you sing another tune. So the tune every week, match the day. Right, that's the tune we do every. Now again, same problem. Sorry, it works with Adam Zamira. Okay, I've never heard it with Adam Zamira, but okay. So here's the and Shehamala. I've also never heard it with Shehamala, but there we go. Adon Olam, you cannot change the tune in the youth, and they'll really not react very well. So the question is that a problem? It's a non-Jewish tune. It's a non-Jewish tune. So all these questions we have. So we have the Radbaz who says no, only singing tavern songs. We have the Bach who says everything's fine except when it's a song used for Avodah Zarah, when it's a song used for another religion. At this point, that seems quite clear-cut. We're now going to look at a couple of sources who actually go the other way and are much, much more stringent. If you look at source 6, we have the Egeret Musa, who brings this in an extremely strong way. This is Rabbi Shlomi Alami, who lived in Spain in the 14th century, the 15th century. And he says the following: there are wicked chazanim who stop in the middle of blessings with love songs from the sons of Edom and Ishmaelites, that's the Christians and the Muslims, in order to find favor in the eyes of the people. And they are like idol worshippers. This is Rabbi Shlomo Lamy is not one to mince his words, it seems, right? He's very, very strong here. He's saying, you're doing it to find favor, you're just doing it because you want to be popular, you want to be beloved. So you put in your Adele and your Paul McCartney and your Les Mis and whatever else into the tune, so everyone goes, oh, this guy's great. It says it's like an idolater, like an idol worshiper, okay? Now, maybe there's a counter argument to that, which is, well, hang on. What if the Chazan's not doing it because he wants to be beloved? He's doing it because he wants people to enjoy. He wants people to feel connected. And what do people feel connected? They feel connected with songs they know. The Igarot Musa is not concerned about that. He sees it very one, but I think there's an argument to make it a little bit harsh. Probably the most famous, if you look at source 7 on the next page, probably the most famous teshuva, the most famous answer written on this question is by the Tzitz Eliezer. The Tzitz Eliezer is one of the most important poskim of the 20th century. And he writes a really, really long teshuva. You can't. I brought you the first line because it sums it up. The whole teshuva would take us until tomorrow. But he writes. This is his beginning, and it sets the scene perfectly. Someone asks him, "Can I use non-Jewish music in tefillah?" And he says, "Behold, in my opinion, it is an abomination to clothe sacred things in filthy garments." That's how he begins his teshuva. He said, "No, of course you can't. You can't say something kadosh, something pure, something holy, tefillah, and put non-Jewish music. What are you doing?" That's the Tzitz Eliezer. Very, very, very strong. So from here, it would seem that it's completely not allowed. It's definitely according to the Tzitz Eliezer, there's no way to allow it. But now we're going to look at two sources that say the opposite. The first one, source 8, is an amazing source from Rabbi Yisrael Moshe Chaza in the Krach Shel Romi. And he was a rabbi who lived in Rome, very well respected for his halachic opinion, which is why this carries weight, even though maybe you wouldn't think it would. And he says the following: "I saw some of the greatest and most famous sages who were great singers on the scale of music, headed by the wonderful Rabbi Avraham HaKohen Ariash. For the scales of music of the Yom Noraim, they would go to the church behind the curtain during their holiday to learn from the submissive voice which breaks the heart. And they would arrange from those voices, Kadoshim and Kadoshot, a thing of wonder. And such a Ma'aseh Rav, the action which proves it's permissible, is great support to all that has been said and explained, that it is permissible to use non-Jewish music in tefillah. And one can learn a Kal V'chomer, the songs of Ishmael, most of which are love songs. They are permitted to sing them in Hebrew and in prayers and with sacred words." So he says the following. He says, "I saw the great Rabbanim, the great Chazanim of my day in Rome. They would go to the churches, they would stand behind the curtain, and they would listen, and they'd go, oh, people are going to like this." And they would listen, they'd make a note of the music, and they'd take the music, and they'd bring it to shul, when? On the Yom Noraim, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. This is when they thought it would be appropriate. And he said, we have a concept of a Ma'aseh Rav. When we have a story of Rabbanim that we trust, and we see them doing something like this, it must be okay. So says Rabbi Chaza. And he says, therefore, we can learn, if you can even take Christian music used for worship, and daven with it, then obviously love songs, no problem. That's what Rabbi Chaza says. In source 9, Rav Avadia Yosef, he quotes this, and he seems to like this very much as a source. And he says, I'm just going to quote the last two lines here because I think it's absolutely fascinating. Well, he says, anyway, I'll read the whole thing quickly. He says, indeed, for the Ma'aseh Rav, from some of the Gonei Yisrael who composed songs of praises to Hashem according to the melody of love songs, including the Shirei HaBakashot recited in our everyday Friday night with a large congregation in the synagogues of Sfardim and Edot HaMizrach and Israel and diaspora. And the heart of the congregation was drawn after them with awe and reverence, with joy and with a good heart and thanksgiving in the voice of singing. So Rav Avadia is saying the opposite of what we saw before from the Igarot Musa, and he's saying people were moved. He said it proves it's okay, and people were moved. They enjoyed it. They found it beautiful. They were moved. It led them to a good place. It should be allowed, says Rav Avadia. And in source 10, he says something really fascinating. I want to hear your views on this. He says, according to Rabbi Yosef Shul Nathanson, it is permissible to turn a church into a shul. We know this. Lots of places do that. The Adas around the corner turn the church into a shul. Kal V'chomer, how much more so is it permissible to turn a church melody into a sacred melody of the shuls? So Rav Ovadia Yosef wants to learn through a kal v'chomer. He's saying, if I can take a church and turn that into a shul, why can't I take a church song and turn that into a shul song? Kal v'chomer. It's how much more? I should interested to people like that logic. Do we think it holds track? Go on, Stephen.
I want to know,
Yes.
did the church authorities in medieval time object to their songs being incorporated in the Jewish service?
This is an excellent point. Okay, this is an excellent point, which we will come to now. Okay, so the Minchas Hakazayit disagrees with this Rav Ovadia Yosef, and he says something really interesting, which I think is along the lines of what you're saying. He said we didn't have the concept, I think, back then of the sort of copyright trademark, where they'd come bursting in and saying, hang on, that's my song. That's not the problem. The problem is as follows. When a church is sold to a shul, sold to Jewish people to become a shul, what happens? We consecrate it, but before we deconsecrate it, correct, okay? In order, when they sell the church, they are deconsecrating or they are mevatling, they are nullifying any sanctity they hold in the building. It's now just a bunch of bricks. Because they're saying, we don't care anymore. It's an empty vessel. That's all it is. They're deconsecrating it, they're leaving, they're mevatling, they're nullifying it. So then I can turn it into a shul. Fine. With these songs, who's to say that they are nullifying it? I think this links to Stephen's point. Who's saying that they are saying, well, we don't care about these songs anymore? The opposite. We know they do. They're still singing them. We know they care about these songs. We know that it's still part of their liturgy and part of their worship. And therefore, we can't use the same logic, says the Minchas Kazaitz at least. Disagrees, and I think this is a very strong rebuttal to Rav Ovadia. Saying that doesn't make, you can't say that. You can't take one proof from the other, because in one time they are showing it's their intention to not have this building anymore, but they can't say that with the songs, and therefore it seems to be problematic. So I think we could possibly make an argument on that Rav Ovadia. The final two sources I want to bring, one of them I haven't included on the source sheet, but it's a fascinating source by the Kaf HaChaim. The Kaf HaChaim is a very important posek in the Sephardi world. He says that a chazan can sing a non-Jewish tune if he doesn't know the lyrics to the song. He can sing a non-Jewish tune if he doesn't know the lyrics to the song. Why? Why should that be the case? What difference does it make if he knows the lyrics, doesn't it?
In mind, he won't be thinking of the words.
He won't be thinking of the words. And really the Kaf HaChaim is saying, not just, if it's a very popular song, but the chazan doesn't know the words, and everyone else. No, if it's a song that the congregation is not going to know the words to, seemingly for the Kaf HaChaim, that's not going to be a problem. And this leads us to another problem. This leads us to another issue that we might have with taking the tunes of Les Mis or anything else and putting it into our davening, which is what's going to happen if I get up and I start singing the Kedusha, and let's assume that I sing it well enough that you'll actually recognize the songs from Les Mis, right? What are you all going to be thinking of? You're all going to think, hang on, I know that. There's a castle on a cloud, Les Mis. I went to see that when I was 30. That was a really good show with understudy. He was terrible. Your mind's going to go completely off from Tefillah. You're going to start thinking about the show. You're going to start thinking about going to see. You're going to think about the words of the. You're not going to be thinking about the words of Tefillah. So the Kaf HaChaim says, if I don't know the lyrics, then I'm not going to have that problem. I'm not going to come across that problem. If you look at the final source about source 11 from the Penine Halacha, I'm a big fan of Rav Eliezer Melamed, who's writing now, modern day. He says the poskim disagree whether or not it's permitted to use melodies of offensive songs for prayers and liturgy. In practice, when the congregation is not familiar with a vulgar song's lyrics, it is customary to be lenient and adjust the melody to suit the prayer. But if the congregation recognizes the song, its tune may not be used for prayer, because when the people sing it, they will be reminded of the crude theme of the song, and their concentration is likely to be disrupted. So we had a number of problems here with this question. Can we use non-Jewish music in Shabbat? We said, if it's used for idolatry, there are those who say even then you can. The Rav Ovadia Yosef, the Krach Shel Romi, they said that. In general, I think there's a lot of people who say if it's used for idolatry, got to avoid it. It's going to be very problematic for us to use. Then, if it's vulgar, if the words are inappropriate, it's also going to be very problematic. We shouldn't use that for tefillah. But even if none of those things apply, and we just have a nice song, a nice Les Mis song, a nice Adele song, a nice Ed Sheeran song, and we want to put it into tefillah, what's the big problem that we're going to have? that we're going to take people's minds away from tefillah. That's the exact opposite of what a chazan should be doing. Chazan should be allowing people to channel their kavanah, not to take it away. And that, I think, is going to be very problematic.
What about if you have modern popular Israeli songs?
Excellent question. I think with this logic, you could very well run into the same point. So I don't know, I can't remember if this was Rabbi Shista. So again, stop me if it was. I know some people had a big problem with the Sham el Sheikh Adon Olam. That wasn't you. I can't remember who it was. Adon Olam Hashem Allah. Right. Some people had a big problem with that because they said it was like a modern pop Israeli pop song. Right, it has nothing to do with any tefillah. Nowadays, I think with that song particularly, if I hear that song, I immediately think of Adon Olam. So that it's changed our mindset. But to your question, Israeli pop songs, we don't have the problem of it being a non-Jewish song. But if it's going to take your mind away, I think you have the same problem. If you want to start singing, Netta, who won Eurovision, I'm Not Your Toy, that whole stuff. I don't know how you fit a Kedusha to that, by the way. If you can, I'd be interested to see. But if you want to
try,
yeah, you've got to make the chicken noise. You've got to make the chicken noises in there as well. Right? I think that would be equally problematic because you're going to run into the same problem. You're taking people's kavanah, you're taking people's intention and direction away. But when we come back to some of the things we talked about, match of the day, there's no lyrics to it. I don't think you're going to have such a problem there. I think you're going to have such a problem with taking people's mind. Maybe if there's a big match on that day and people are worried, you'll take their mind off. But generally, you're not going to take people's mind off. Yeah, exactly. Even more kavanah. So, but also, I think with the songs we talked about, where if it's changed and our perception of the song has changed, it's now a Jewish song. Matzor is a Jewish song. Doesn't matter where its origin was. Doesn't matter Kiesh Meresh about the origin, the Kaddish. Because nowadays, no one's mind goes to the Russian marching. So probably now everyone's mind. We'll come back to your story, Rabbi. We say there at the Om the Rai of everyone, but no one's mind goes to the Russian marching song. Everyone else is concentrating. Is not going to take your mind away. So I think that's the clear line we want to make, that we don't want to use non-Jewish music when it's going to take our mind away. We want our kavanah to be there, and that's really the key point. But when it's not a situation where it's going to take our kavanah away for whatever reason, then I think we can make a case for it to be permissible.
One more question.
Yeah.
What about non-Jewish songs written by a Jewish author?
So this is a good question. You can only sing that at Hanukkah time. All right, so it's a really good question. Or songs which are written by a non-Jew with very Jewish meaning. So what about Joseph? Can I sing Joe? So I was discussing this after we did the show. I was discussing this with a few of the parents and a few of the youth. Some did Joseph. Again, there's no clear-cut halakhic answer because you can find sources that would say Rav Ovadia Yosef would say 100. What's the problem? 100% you could sing Joseph. Other people that sits Eliezer would go absolutely mad at you, and he'd be having none of it. So I think generally, you're going to have this problem. If I got up and started singing Joseph, what's your mind's going to think about Joseph? You're going to think about the play. You're going to think about seeing it. Maybe if it's that week's parasha, there's we can make an exception. I don't know, because then your mind is on something appropriate. But yeah, I'll give you an example. A chazan here, he sang on Friday night, Hamavir Banav. He sang to the tune of There Can Be Miracles from Prince of Egypt. Okay. Now, the bit of There Can Be Miracles in Prince of Egypt is the song they play, for anyone who hasn't seen the movie in a while, when the sea is splitting. I thought that was completely appropriate. I would say, in my personal opinion. Written by Jews, but even beyond that, the words of Hamaver Banav are about us recognizing the miracle of the splitting of the sea. So even if your mind goes to that, you're recognizing the miracle. Again, this is all sort of personal taste. There's different ways you could look at it.
Most of the tunes that are used in this way are because everybody knows them.
Right.
That's the whole point. So they are against the definition, if it distracts you, they're all designed almost to distract you.
But what tunes are we talking about? Like what type of tune?
Well, they're
okay.
So often used in
That's a European folks.
I can't remember.
Yeah. So the Hatikva also comes from that. But again, what I would say with songs like the Hatikva, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav,
her name is used.
Yeah, I've heard it used. But personally, I don't think it should be. From this, that's my That's my personal conclusion. But if someone's used it, you can't say you're wrong because there's loads of sources that say they're not wrong. But so, yeah.
Rabbi Rabinowitz used to object to.
I don't know, love. Yeah.
Back in the German brothel.
Yes, yeah. I remember. I've heard that story.
Something.
Yes, sure.
Many years ago, I was doing a booklet with a certain rabbi, and it wasn't either you or Stephen. And I did the Shema book.
Wasn't me either.
I always do one.
Okay.
And he certainly made a comment to me about saying it at
Really?
the time. Yes.
So someone asked also chuppah tunes. It generally seems to be generally this goes out the window. By the way, with chuppah people take non-Jewish songs and they just put it into. I've seen all sorts of chuppahs done. I don't think the chuppah counts as tefillah in the same way this does. So I'm not quite sure. I don't know what the rabbi just would say. I wouldn't say I have as much of a problem with people taking non-Jewish music in chuppah as I do in tefillah. Slightly different over there.
Can I say that?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
my
Sorry.
late father, Shutz, Mayor Ben Sinai, was vehemently opposed to using non-Jewish music done. He said, we've got such a wealth of music in the Jewish world. Why do we have to do that? And we felt it was completely wrong.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
Can I also say,
Yeah.
Julian Fisher, who appeared as Jean Valjean
Yes.
in Les Mis,
Yes.
said when he sings Bring Him Home, which I'm sure you know
Yes.
very well, that for him, that gives him as much emotion and kavanah as when he does Cohen Israel.
So the only thing I would say about that is that might well work for him and bring him home. I remember Judah Fisher famously, he sung when the Pope came to Israel when Gilad Shalit was in captivity. He sung "Bring Him Home" for Gilad Shalit, which was very, very powerful. And I think "Bring Him Home" for all of us now probably concerts we tend to sing it for Israel because of the hostages. It has a resonance for sure. But the question is, for him, it might give him that kavana. But for everyone else, will it give them kavana, or will it make them think of their miss? Maybe maybe that again. I think the other thing is that songs change. There's an other, for like all the things we talk about, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, which was not really written as a religious. I think it's become that way. I think now that is the song of Yerushalayim, and that is a hope. So I think that's very appropriate to use in Davening. I always use it in Davening, right?
That's not a Jewish tune. She borrowed it from a European.
Right, but the point is, I think now it is. Because that's what I use an example as well, a modern example. The song Hashem Melech, Hashem Melech, Hashem Melech. That's a French pop song, right? It's a French pop song. But now, if you play that to a bunch of kids, like Jewish kids, they will hear Hashem Melech, Hashem Melech. They won't know the French ones. So does it matter that it was originally a French pop song? And for this purpose, I don't think it does. Because I think, it's not, if it was an idolatrous French song, maybe, but it's not. It's a random French song that's become a Jewish song, and that's how we see it. And if people's mind, if the kids' mind, when I sing that song, and the youth say, if they go to Hashem Melech, Baruch Hashem, what a wonderful thing for them to think about. Okay, that's Kavanah. So again, I think that's it's a malleable line, but for me, that's what I would conclude for myself. Just my own personal thoughts.
Someone who uses Israeli pop like Al Kolela.
Yes.
Not because of the lyrics, just to make them think in Israel.
Yes.
Yeah. Not because of the words.
Yes.
Just the tune makes them in Israel.
Yes. I think that's fair. Also, Al Kolela are beautiful, very beautiful, and I think we could.
They're Al Israeli songs.
Yeah.
Not for the lyrics, just.
Avi,
Yes, Barry.
Avi,
Hello to Barry.
Avi.
Hi, Barry. How are you?
Well, we're marooned here at the moment.
You were singing "Bring Him Home," Barry.
Yeah, quite. I was just going to say we had a cousin at Kingsbury that on Shabbat Reishit always did Musaf Kedusha to the New World Symphony.
This is someone else told me. Apparently, this is a Bet Limit tradition.
I don't even know all about it.
Yeah, Arnie, you told me. Someone told me it was. Oh, no, Stephen Truman told me it's a Bet Limit tradition. Oh, okay, all right.
Only
Keep well, Barry. Keep well.
because I started it in Bet Limit.
Barry, stay safe.
Thank you.
The main point of all of this is Eliezer Melamed is spot on. When the melody becomes more important than the words, you've lost. That's not a chazan's job. I don't care how beautiful the melody is. Israeli melodies, we're on the same page here, obviously.
Yeah.
Israeli melodies are no problem whatsoever because none of us associate them with taverns and it.
Yeah.
It's an Israeli song, no? no problem. But you take something from the Goyim, and once you see people smiling and laughing at the melody you're using, you've lost. You have no business to do that, Phil.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. The melody has to aid the words; it can't take over. That's the Rabbi says. So I think fiddler. I think you possibly going to have
made by Jews and music.
Doesn't matter.
But again, I think you're going to have the same problem that if you get up and sing "If I'm a Rich Man," yeah.
But everybody will smile and laugh.
But that being said,
That's a joke.
I'll give you an example because I can't remember. Again, this might have been. Sorry, I'll keep quoting you. It might have been. I can't remember. But someone sang Shema Bani, and they did it to the tune of the Children's Blessing in Fiddler on the Roof. I thought, actually, like the original Shema Bani songs or whatever, but I thought that was probably quite appropriate because that's a very emotive song about a parent blessing a child, which is what Shema Bani is about. Maybe you can make an argument for that, but if you just take Fiddler on the Roof songs in general and put them in Davening, even though it's Jewish written, it's very Jewish, the tunes, again, people are going to think about the play. And that's the problem we're going to lead to. So yeah, I think that's what we're going for.
Great, thank you very much. That was, we could count for hours on this because everyone seems to be very engaged. Let's do a Bonham Kaddish now.